Welcome, you curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're doing something, well, a little different. We're taking a magnifying glass to a single incredibly packed day, September 2, 2025.
hmm
It was a Tuesday that just saw headlines ignite across the globe. I mean, everything from unprecedented geopolitical alliances forming to seismic shifts in tech law,
Right.
and then devastating natural disasters, contentious domestic policy decisions, just a lot.
Indeed. And what's truly striking, I think, is how interconnected so many of these seemingly separate events actually are.
Yeah.
They're like threads in a really complex tapestry.
Mm.
They reveal these underlying tensions and emerging trends that continue to shape our world. We've gathered, well, quite a stack of sources detailing about 15 significant global and U.S. stories from that single day. And our mission, as always, is to kind of extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight, offering you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
Exactly. Think of it not just as a news recap, but more like a snapshot, a single frame from a very fast-moving film.
That's a good way to put it.
Yet, it's a frame that tells a surprisingly complete story about where we stood, on that particular Tuesday. It's a lot to cover, so let's unpack this. Maybe starting on the international stage. September 2nd saw some truly striking displays of power and shifting allegiances.
Definitely. If we zoom out a bit and connect these individual events to the bigger picture, you can clearly see a deliberate effort by certain nations to project strength, maybe challenge existing orders, and, well, reshape global influence. This wasn't just diplomatic theater, it felt like a demonstration of intent.
And the most prominent example, I guess, was Beijing. First up, China hosted this massive World War II Victory Day parade, 80 years since the war's end. But this was far from just a historical remembrance, right? It felt like a major geopolitical statement.
Oh, absolutely. The guest list and the optics were particularly fascinating. You had Chinese President Xi Jinping welcoming Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un to Beijing. That's well, truly unprecedented tableaus. Leaders, especially considering their relationships with the U.S., and leaders from Serbia, Slovakia, Pakistan, Uzbekistan were also there, indicating maybe a wider circle of influence.
An unprecedented tableau is definitely the right phrase.
Oh,
Our sources really highlight this gathering as a clear signal, an alignment among nations often seen as adversaries to the U.S. and its allies.
right.
And Putin and Xi didn't just shake hands, they signed over 20 cooperation agreements, really solidifying their partnership.
Yeah, over 20. And China also rolled out this impressive display of new weapons, lots of martial pageantry. President Xi warned the world faced a choice between peace or war, casting China as a stabilizing power.
Wow.
This wasn't subtle at all. Washington and its allies clearly saw this as messaging aimed squarely at them. It signaled a kind of hardening of blocks.
Right, making crisis management much harder.
Exactly. Whether you're talking Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, or even Ukraine, it makes everything significantly more complicated. It just creates a more polarized, potentially more volatile international environment where finding global consensus gets even tougher.
And speaking of Ukraine, the very same day saw Russia escalate its drone and missile barrages. A stark reminder that, despite any diplomatic talk, the conflict just grinds on. Kyiv, for its part, vowed to push for even tighter sanctions.
Yes, officials reported heavy drone and missile activity across Ukraine with particular concern around infrastructure targets. There were even evacuations reported in Russia's Rostov region after a Ukrainian strike, which shows the conflict's reach. And Kyiv reiterated its firm stance. They would never accept legitimizing Russia's occupation of the Zaporizhia nuclear plant.
A constant worry, that plant.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
A critical strategic asset and a huge humanitarian concern.
And then you had Putin's remarks made while he was in Beijing saying Russia didn't oppose Ukraine joining the EU, but still rejecting NATO membership. That felt like, I don't know, a carefully crafted message.
It was indeed read by most observers as tactical messaging, not a genuine shift in war aims. By seeming open to Ukraine's EU path, Putin probably hopes to sow subtle divisions within Europe, knowing, that EU membership doesn't carry the same military security guarantees as NATO.
Right?
He's likely attempting to play on Europe's existing energy and security anxieties, trying to maybe relieve some pressure on Western capitals for continued air defenses and that crucial funding for Ukraine. It's sort of a psychological tactic, trying to subtly undermine Western unity.
Okay, so from Europe, let's pivot across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. President Trump announced U.S. forces carried out a lethal strike in international waters. This must have caused quite a stir.
It certainly did. The target was described as a fast boat operated by Tren de Aragua.
That's the Venezuelan gang.
Exactly. Designated by the U.S. as a transnational criminal and terrorist group. Trump stated it was loaded with drugs. The strike tragically killed 11 people. And for those maybe unfamiliar, Tren de Aragua is a highly organized, very dangerous Venezuelan gang whose operations have spread across South America and now, worryingly, into the U.S. as well.
And there was video. Trump posted a video showing a speedboat exploding. Pretty dramatic stuff.
Yes, but Venezuela's government quickly questioned that footage. They demanded answers, hinted the video might have even been fabricated. This action was directly tied to a recent buildup of American naval assets down there in the Southern Caribbean, and it immediately inflamed regional politics. Analysts raised serious legal and strategic questions about using military force for interdictions like this, in international waters, especially against a non-state actor.
Yeah, the legality seems fuzzy.
Very. And there were warnings about potential tit-for-tat spirals where such an assertive move could provoke retaliation or just further destabilize an already volatile region. It really puts the boundaries of military engagement for counter-narcotics under the microscope.
Okay, shifting again to the Middle East. September 2nd saw Israeli forces begin a new ground operation, this time focused intensely on Gaza City.
Right. The IDF framed this push as targeting remaining Hamas leadership and infrastructure, basically a continuation of their stated goals. However, Gaza's health authorities and humanitarian groups quickly issued these dire warnings: mounting casualties and accelerating collapse of essential services, hospitals, water infrastructure, the works.
And the reactions were, well, as expected, highly polarized. Israel citing self-defense, military necessity.
Protecting its citizens.
But UN officials, aid groups, they painted a grim picture, warning of catastrophic civilian harm and repeating these urgent pleas for humanitarian pauses for aid access.
And this raises an extremely important question, I think, about the international community's role and the impact of global scrutiny on ongoing conflicts. Our sources highlighted a really significant development on that day, September 2nd. The International Association of Genocide Scholars, the IAGS.
Okay, I've heard of them, a research organization.
Exactly, a leading independent one.
Yeah.
They declared that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is. And it was made amid widespread reports of famine, forced displacement, destruction of infrastructure. It sparked immediate global debate, as you can imagine. Israeli officials and their allies vehemently rejected it, calling it politically motivated, baseless. But this declaration, coming from such a respected academic body, it significantly escalates the legal and moral scrutiny of the conflict.
Yeah.
It could potentially influence international legal proceedings, diplomatic pressure moving forward. It's a somber and deeply serious moment in how the world is viewing this conflict.
And on a final somber note for global tensions from that day, a rare but significant event. An Indonesian diplomat in Lima, Peru, was shot dead by an unknown assailant.
Yes, that incident starkly highlighted the rising security challenges in Lima, which is apparently grappling with increasing extortion and homicides. It immediately strained Indonesia-Peru relations and led to urgent calls for, better diplomatic security globally.
Tragic reminder.
Of the vulnerabilities diplomatic personnel face, even in seemingly stable capitals.
Okay, let's bring it back to the U.S. now. Back home, September 2nd was a day of really significant legal rulings and policy announcements, things that put presidential power, judicial independence, and big tech right under the microscope.
Definitely. This section reveals a fascinating sort of ongoing interplay between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And you see how courts are grappling with these modern challenges that the founders, could never have imagined, especially around technology.
One of the biggest stories, surely, was the federal judge's ruling in that landmark antitrust case against Google. People had been watching that one for years.
Right. And the judge delivered a split decision. Crucially for Google, they would not have to sell off dominant products like Chrome or Android.
Okay.
And they could keep paying partners like Apple for default placement. That was a big win for Alphabet, Google's parent company. But the ruling also imposed significant behavioral remedies, which means Google is now required to share certain search data with approved rivals and curb some of its exclusivity practices that were seen as stifling competition.
So Alphabet shares jumped, but reactions were mixed.
Very mixed. Investors celebrated, saw it as a win. Competitors welcomed the new data access, hoping for a fairer playing field. But many antitrust advocates, they blasted the outcome as too lenient. said it didn't go nearly far enough to break Google's market power.
And the ruling also mentioned something about new search-like services. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. These search-like services are essentially things like emergent AI chatbots, virtual assistants, other platforms that can answer queries, provide information, often bypassing traditional search engines entirely.
Oh, okay. Like ChatGPT and similar things.
Exactly. By recognizing them, the court is basically acknowledging that future antitrust battles won't just be about web search. It's about how these new digital gatekeepers control information access. It means Google's behavioral remedies will have to extend to these evolving services too. And that could shape everything from how small businesses get discovered online to how easily you find unbiased information. It's a really fascinating, forward-looking part of the ruling.
Right. Forcing courts to think about data power without killing innovation.
Precisely. It's a tricky balance.
Okay, another win, maybe, for institutional independence. An appeals court reinstated fired FTC Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter.
Yes, that decision significantly fortifies the traditional independence of these multi-member commissions.
Yeah.
It goes back to a landmark 1935 Supreme Court case, Humphrey's Executor.
Right, the one that says presidents can't just fire officials of independent agencies without cause.
Exactly. It reinforces that crucial separation of powers. This ruling signals pretty strong judicial skepticism toward what some saw as sweeping presidential removal powers.
So this preserves the FTC's partisan balance, doesn't it? Which seems particularly important right now as the commission is pursuing some aggressive merger and antitrust cases.
That's right.
Could set up a big Supreme Court clash over independent agencies themselves.
It really could. The balance of power within these agencies is critical for them to enforce regulations without, undue political influence. This ruling is a strong judicial statement supporting that independence.
And another challenge to executive power. A federal appeals court upheld a lower court's ruling that most of President Trump's tariffs, including those he called the Liberation Day tariffs, were unlawfully imposed.
Yeah, this court's decision was pretty emphatic. Tariffs are a core congressional power, not an executive one. It underlined that the legislative branch holds the primary authority over trade policy, not the president acting alone.
And Trump vowed to appeal.
Predictably, yes, to the Supreme Court.
But this ruling seems like it has really broad implications then. For U.S. trade policy, for separation of powers.
It absolutely does. It puts a check on potential executive overreach in trade matters, basically forcing future administrations to work more closely with Congress on any significant tariff actions. It reinforces a long-standing constitutional principle.
We also saw two interconnected stories regarding the military's role inside the U.S., which always tends to spark debate.
Yes. First, a federal judge issued an injunction blocking Trump's deployment of Guard and Marines in California for, policing-like roles. The judge specifically cited the Posse Comitatus Act, which, for anyone unfamiliar, is this centuries-old federal law generally banning the use of the U.S. military for domestic law enforcement. It's a cornerstone, really, of keeping civilian governance and military power separate.
And the White House argued.
They argued constitutional authority for the deployment. California called it a clear overreach.
Okay, then on the same day, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved a DOJ request to assign up to 600 Judge Advocate General Attorneys, JAG lawyers, as temporary immigration judges.
Right, starting with about 150, the idea being to address the crushing backlog at the border. These two stories, though distinct, they really raise important questions about the evolving boundaries of military roles inside the U.S. justice system. I mean, while JAG attorneys are trained lawyers, their primary loyalty is to the military structure. So there are significant due process concerns here, given the incredible complexity of asylum and removal law.
Where a mistake can have huge consequences.
Life or death, potentially, for an applicant.
Yeah.
Ensuring fair, impartial hearings with proper legal representation is paramount, and questions arise about how well military lawyers, used to a different legal system, can uphold these civilian due process standards in such a sensitive area.
Right. Shifting gears a bit, the House Oversight Committee released over 33,000 pages of Jeffrey Epstein records from the DOJ. Videos, interviews, logs. Felt like a potential moment of reckoning.
Well, yes and no. While Democrats and some reporters noted much of it was actually already public and criticized the unstructured document dump as maybe political theater.
Yeah.
The release did add a small number of new items. For instance, certain Customs and Border Protection flight logs, previously unconfirmed, provided some more concrete details on who might have been flying with Epstein.
So not a complete bombshell, perhaps, but still a step towards more transparency, even if it was a messy one.
You could say that. And survivors and lawmakers immediately renewed calls for more comprehensive disclosure, one that protects victims, of course, but finally ends some of the speculation about who was involved.
The demand is for clarity, not just data.
Exactly. An organized, transparent accounting that delivers some measure of justice and closure.
Okay, a couple of other domestic items from September 2nd. President Trump announced the move of the U.S. Space Command headquarters to Huntsville, Alabama.
Yes, citing its strategic value. This decision reflected the ongoing prioritization of space as a critical domain in defense strategy. Its growing importance for national security, military operations.
And a boost for Huntsville's economy, presumably?
Oh, absolutely. A significant economic boost for Huntsville, which is already a big hub for aerospace and defense.
And then, sadly, in Chicago, the Labor Day weekend leading into September 2nd saw a tragic surge in gun violence. At least 58 people shot, 8 killed. The city, however, refused federal assistance, which reignited these urgent debates over law enforcement strategies, community support.
Yeah, this situation in Chicago really highlighted the persistent challenges of urban violence in America and the complex political dynamics around federal intervention. While the city refused direct federal help, it continued grappling with how to effectively deploy local resources, community-led initiatives to try and stem the violence. It just underscores that broader national conversation on public safety and the best ways to achieve it.
Okay, let's pivot now to the economy. September 2nd brought a mix of volatility, some significant market indicators, giving us a kind of pulse check on global finance.
Definitely. This provides a crucial window into how, geopolitics, supply-demand dynamics, investor sentiment, how they're constantly tugging at global markets, creating both opportunities and anxieties.
Oil markets, for instance, swung wildly. An OPEC Plus meeting was looming, and U.S. sanctions targeting Iranian oil revenue were starting to bite.
Right. Crude prices settled higher initially.
Mm-hmm.
Analysts widely expected OPEC Plus to keep its output cuts in place, signaling tight supply. But then, within just a day, prices slipped pretty dramatically on chatter that the group might consider another output hike in October.
Whiplash.
Totally. This back and forth really underscored how geopolitics, like those Iranian sanctions and what we call cartel calculus, the internal decision-making within OPEC Plus are pulling prices in opposite directions. Creates intense volatility. And for you, the consumer, this translates directly to unpredictable and often higher prices at the pump.
Across the Atlantic, Britain's gilt market deepened its rout. Okay, explain that. What does a gilt market rout actually mean for everyday people?
Sure. A gilt market is basically Britain's government bond market. Gilts are UK government bonds. A rout means confidence in that UK government debt was faltering. It pushed 30-year gilt yields to multi-decade highs, levels not seen in roughly 27 years. And that, in turn, sent the British pound sterling slipping.
Okay, so higher yields, what's the impact?
For everyday citizens, it translates potentially to much higher borrowing costs for the government. That can impact public services, investment in infrastructure, even things like mortgage rates. It reflected global growth angst, for sure, but also specific domestic anxieties about the new government's fiscal stance, its approach to tax and spending, and the sheer scale of its budget measures. Higher yields literally constrain the government's fiscal space, limiting its ability to spend or stimulate the economy.
Got it. On the business front, Klarna, once Europe's most valuable buy now, pay later startup, they finally set terms for a U.S. IPO, targeting up to $14 billion valuation.
That's right. Now, while that valuation is significantly below its sort of stratospheric 2021 private peak,
Yeah, I remember that.
it's still notably above its 2022 trough. So it offers a crucial test of investor appetite for what they now see as profitable growth and, importantly, credit discipline in the buy now, pay later space. Competition's intensifying, interest rates are higher.
So it's a bellwether for the whole sector.
Pretty much, yeah, for the whole fintech sector.
On a more positive economic note, though, South Korea's semiconductor exports hit a record high in August 2025. About $15 billion, up nearly a third year over year.
That's huge. This strong performance highlights the sector's incredible resilience and continued growth, especially with the surging demand for AI chips. It has profoundly positive implications for technology supply chains globally, for the broader electronics markets. It signals continued robust demand for advanced computing components.
Good news there. Finally, New Zealand announced a policy change, allowing millionaire investors with residence visas to buy or build homes valued above NZ $5 million. That's about US $3.55 million.
Yeah, this policy is clearly designed to attract high-net-worth foreigners, bring their investment capital into the New Zealand economy.
God.
But critics immediately raised concerns that it could exacerbate housing inequality. I mean, in a country already facing housing affordability challenges, allowing such high-value purchases by wealthy overseas investors could potentially drive up prices further.
Making it even harder for average New Zealanders.
Exactly. Making homeownership even more unattainable for many and potentially creating social divisions. It's a tricky balance governments try to strike.
Right. Okay, we can't ignore the sheer force of nature and the urgent humanitarian needs that also dominated headlines on September 2nd. It was a stark reminder of, well, humanity's vulnerability.
These stories, yeah, they really remind us of the fragility of life and the compounding vulnerabilities many communities face globally, where environmental disasters often intersect with existing crises like conflict or poverty.
Afghanistan, a nation already grappling with so much, suffered a powerful earthquake. The death toll, initially confirmed over 1,100, but some sources reported it surpassed 1,400, thousands injured too.
It's just devastating. And this occurred in an area with incredibly fragile infrastructure, severely limited state capacity. Aid flows, already strained, have been further squeezed by international sanctions, making effective relief efforts incredibly difficult. Humanitarian agencies were quick to warn of looming secondary crises, widespread diseases, especially things like cholera, and severe hunger as communities just struggle to cope without adequate support. It's a compounding tragedy.
And in another tragic disaster, a catastrophic landslide in Sudan's Darfur Mountains killed over 1,000 people, wiped out an entire village where many displaced by the civil war had sought shelter.
Yeah, yet another layer of suffering on top of an already dire humanitarian situation in that conflict-ridden region. It starkly highlights those compounded vulnerabilities. People already displaced by man-made crises, then becoming victims of environmental disasters,
Seeking safety only to find.
only to be met by nature's fury. It's truly heartbreaking.
Meanwhile, Hurricane Lorena strengthened to a Category 3 system, 185-kilometer winds threatening Mexico's Pacific coast.
Right. Forecasters warned of rainfall totals up to 250 millimeters. In some areas, that's a tremendous amount of water. It highlights the severe risks to communities with vulnerable infrastructure, particularly in coastal regions prone to flooding, landslides from such intense storms, a recurring, intensifying challenge.
Definitely. And in the realm of climate science, September 2nd saw more than 85 climate experts release this blistering 400-plus page rebuttal to a DOE-commissioned paper. Sounds like a scientific battleground.
It absolutely was. These experts argued that the Department of Energy paper lacks merit, that it fundamentally misrepresents existing scientific literature, used non-standard methods, basically asserting it flatly contradicts mainstream climate science.
And this matters beyond academia.
Oh, hugely. This wasn't just an academic dispute. That DOE report had been cited in efforts to weaken emissions regulations. So this robust rebuttal could potentially arm litigants and agencies who are defending climate policies, providing crucial scientific backing in what are often very politically charged debates.
We also had reports of escalating protests in Indonesia. Police fired tear gas on university campuses, resulting in at least 3 deaths.
Yes, tragically. These protests reflected broader national tensions over widespread political dissatisfaction, demands for comprehensive reforms. The government's response drew significant domestic and international criticism regarding human rights, intensifying calls for accountability and more democratic processes.
On a somber cultural note, we learned of the passing of iconic Canadian actor Graham Greene at 73, celebrated for his groundbreaking work, his advocacy for Indigenous peoples in the arts.
A huge loss. His passing prompted widespread reflections on his legacy, not just as a brilliant actor, which he was, but as a vital voice for representation and authenticity in media. He really paved the way for many, and his impact on diverse storytelling is just profound.
A true icon. And finally, a government helicopter crashed in Gilgit-Baltistan, Pakistan, killing 5 people, including officials.
Yes, that immediately raised concerns about aviation safety in that treacherous mountainous region.
Another stark reminder.
Of the inherent dangers of travel and operations in some of the world's most challenging terrains, and the constant need for vigilance, for investment in safety measures.
Wow. Okay. That truly was a whirlwind deep dive into just one single day, September 2, 2025. From those shifting global power dynamics to crucial domestic legal battles, from economic tremors to heartbreaking humanitarian crises, it's undeniably clear that our world is just constantly in motion, with all these interconnected forces at play.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how each of these events, while distinct in its immediate impact, it really does weave into that larger tapestry of global challenges, interconnected destinies. The decisions made in Beijing, the court rulings in Washington, the natural disasters in Afghanistan and Sudan. They all, in different ways, reflect the complexities of our current era.
Absolutely. You can really see the push and pull of power, the ongoing quest for, justice and transparency, and the ever-present, often overwhelming impact of both human action and natural forces on communities everywhere.
And that raises maybe an important question for you, our listener, as you reflect on the sheer breadth and intensity of these events from just a single day. What patterns or connections stand out to you most? And how do they inform your understanding of the week, the month, or even the year ahead? Where do you see these forces playing out next?
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and keep learning.